Did you know that all the income tax concessions announced by the FM in recent budgets apply only to the new tax regime? In 2020, the finance minister had flagged off a new system of income tax. This was supposed to be a system where the slabs would be liberal, the rates would be low, but taxpayers would enjoy very few tax breaks or concessions. With effect from April 1st, 2024, all taxpayers are assumed to be under the new tax regime. If you want to still stick to the old one, you will have to opt for it before you file your returns. In this episode of Question of Money, I am going to talk about the difference between the new tax regime and the old one and how you should make the choice. So the main points of difference between the old tax regime and the new one are as follows. Firstly, the zero tax slab applies up to an income of rupees 2.5 lakh under the old tax regime. Under the new one, that is bumped up slightly to 3 lakh. Secondly, under the old tax regime, you get a tax rebate if you earn up to 5 lakh a year. This means that you will be paying no tax if you earn up to 5 lakh. Under the new tax regime, this limit is as high as 7 lakh rupees. If you look at the various rates of income tax in the table, you will find that for all incomes up to 15 lakh a year, the new tax regime has much lower rates than the old tax regime. Finally, the fourth point of difference, for income taxpayers who earn more than 5 crore a year, there was a surcharge that was applied on income tax. This surcharge was 37% under the old tax regime. Under the new one, it is just 25%. Therefore, in effect, if you are super rich also, it may make sense to be under the new tax regime because of the lower rate. In order to enjoy the lower rates of tax under the new tax regime, the government expects you to give up a host of tax breaks. So what are the tax breaks that you will be giving up if you go for the new one? First, there are a host of allowances which will no longer be considered as tax breaks. Many of us earn HRA from our employer, house rent allowance, leave travel allowance or leave travel concession. These are considered as exempted under the old tax regime. Under the new one though, these will be considered as part of your income and taxed. Then, people make a lot of investments under section 80C under the old tax regime. You may know the rule that up to 1.5 lakh a year, if invested in certain post office schemes, in your employees' provident fund, in the national pension system, PPF, etc., it gets you an exemption from tax under the old regime. Under the new regime, none of these 80C exemptions apply. So even if you invest in these vehicles, including your employees' provident fund, you will not be getting a tax break for it. This also applies to the additional rupees 50,000 that you invest in the NPS. This is eligible for a tax deduction under old tax regime but not under the new one. Earlier, people used to buy homes for the purpose of availing of tax concessions. This is because the interest that you pay on a home loan up to rupees 2 lakh a year could be kept back from your income if you are under the old tax regime under the tax laws. This home loan deduction is no longer available under the new tax regime. The principal component of the EMI was also exempt under the old tax regime but is not allowed under the new. Deductions towards health insurance premiums, taking care of disabled people or dependent family members, paying some money towards certain medical treatments, all of this enjoyed tax concessions under the old regime but is disallowed under the new regime. Now that you know what you stand to gain or lose under the new tax regime, should you go for it? Now nobody can give you a blanket recommendation about which is better because this clearly depends on your savings, borrowing and other habits. So if you want to avail of the new tax regime, it will be beneficial for you under 4 circumstances. First, your income should be less than 7 lakh a year. Then you get a rebate and you pay zero tax. You should not have a home loan on which you are paying a hefty EMI because home loan interest would have been deductible under the old regime which you won't enjoy under the new one. If you are not able to make investments of up to rupees 1.5 lakh a year in 80C investments, then too the new tax regime is better for you. Ditto if you are investing 50,000 a year towards NPS. You shouldn't have a large outgo towards medical insurance premium, maintenance of disabled people at home or other expenses towards medical treatment. Now, while these are broad indicators on when the new tax regime will be beneficial for you, you should actually use the calculator provided by the income tax department to work out which will work out better for you in terms of tax outgo. We are providing the link to the calculator here.